that's pretty much how quarterbacks get into coaching. They do a decent job of starting for about 5 to 7 years on average. And then the last 5 to 7 years of their career, they spend holding a clipboard for somebody else. And then they just tail into being a quarterback coach and work their way up the chain from there. The fact that it hasn't happened with any other quarterback, I mean, it's ridiculous. But then again, you know, look, I've said it once, I'll say it again. African-American quarterbacks get the short leash as far as their play. They can't play average or they can't play good. They have to play great from day one just to keep their jobs. The moment they slip back to whatever the norm is of the league, they get the hook. Somebody else wants another quarterback to go in there. He's typically white, and that guy takes over. When the black quarterback contract runs out, they cut him. He's never signed again. I mean, case in point, and yeah, this is going to sound a little biased. After what happened to him in Washington and Minnesota, Donovan McNabb should have been picked up as somebody's backup. That's just as simple as it is. What he did in Philadelphia should have warranted a career as, you know, at least a long career as a backup, you know, at some point. Before Bridgewater and Taysom Hill became backups to Drew Brees, they had Mark Brunell as a backup to him, and he was a backup there for about a good 5 to 7 years after he had a long career starting in Jacksonville. So I don't understand how, you know, what makes the decision to say, okay, we're going to pick this guy up as a backup, but not this guy.
A lot of that tends to be stuff that we aren't privy to in the public, because the last I had heard about Donovan McNabb is he did not want to be a backup. He wanted to be a starter. And I can only say from my knowledge of Dante Culpepper is Culpepper refused to be a backup. He wanted to be a starter and a starter only, which is why he was out of the league and then back in the league. He was convinced by Denny Green and Brian Billick to come back into the league. So that's there's stuff that we don't know, and that's why we want to reach out and talk to some of these guys in the offseason and find out, did you have any desire to be a backup? Did you want to continue your career? Did you want to get into coaching? What prevented you from getting into coaching? Let's get some more of these answers so that we can have a clearer picture. You know, and for us, that's what we do. And unfortunately, it's what those other media organizations should be doing right now. Like, shouldn't take us who, you know, yes, I've been involved in the media for a number of years and I have connections in the media that I can call upon, you know, go into my phone right now and call a couple of different people. But it shouldn't take us to be bringing these types of stories to light. And the Frick Pollard Association, whom I reached out to last offseason to be a guest on this podcast, and they never returned my call. That's on them. They're part of the NFL. They're part of the machine, and they provide lists of minority candidates to every single team, and they're clearly not doing their job.
Yeah, but Jay, you're I'm sure you're just saying that to stir the pot a bit, but you also have to accept that the big media outlets and the big players in the media, who are of course celebrities now on Twitter, they're not going to do anything that's really going to upset the billionaire owners. They're just not going to do that. They will
stir the pot, whatever it takes. Like I don't care. I'm going to find a way to get in contact with the Football Association. If I have to blow up their spot every single week as far as sending them emails or correspondence to try to get some type of word with them, even a 30-minute conversation. I saw a representative, and I can't remember what I was watching, the week the season, right between the end of the season and the start of the wildcard games last week. Rep from the Football Association was either on a show on ESPN or NFL Network, and they were talking specifically about the Rooney Rule, because we knew that there were, at the time, 3 head coaching vacancies because Jason Garrett hadn't officially been fired yet. But, yeah, and, you know, to his point, he was saying that things have to change. Like, the rule needs to be amended. It needs to change. The problem is that the rule is part of the competition committee, and someone on the competition committee needs to bring up that the rule needs to change. there are, as far as I know, the competition committee is made up of coaches, executives, and players. So if players aren't bringing it up, and as far as I know, there aren't any minority coaches on the committee. And again, I've already said there's only like 2 GMs, which means the rest of the front office personnel in the NFL is majority white. If they're not going to bring it up, for change or whatever, we can bloviate about it in the media. Even the big outlets can keep saying the rule needs to change, the rule needs to change. But until the competition committee brings it up to change, because the owners aren't going to do it, their thing is, who's the most recently fired black head coach that I can interview that I don't want, who will satisfy the Rooney Rule, and, I'll get around this.
But
James, point 2 years ago when I talked about how, who was it, the Oakland Raiders or somebody had interviewed another team's trainer and cook.
But James,
nobody's to satisfy the rule. That's crazy.
And I don't see anybody in the future bringing it up to such a level because everybody's just been taught a lesson with Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, that's got to change too.
And that's got to change. That's the thing.
That's got to change.
People don't because people don't put their heads above the parapet because they see that when Colin Kaepernick did that, he lost his career, and that's what would happen to anybody in the press who kept hammering on about it. They would just all of a sudden not get invitations to do interviews, and eventually they would be frozen out, and that would be the end of their careers. And that's the sad reality of billionaire owners.
There could be a little bit of light here at the end of the tunnel. As James, you mentioned, teams, it's a passing league, and we are seeing a turnover at the quarterback position. There are a lot more young black men that are becoming star quarterbacks in this league. And once those guys get to the end of their careers, hopefully
what happens?
That will help spark some turnover. The problem is, hopefully they're not getting to the end of their career for another 15 or so years. So,
absolutely.
But the problem is simpler than all that. It's you've got a guy there called Bill Polian, highly respected, blah blah blah, been in the league for hundreds of years. Can on your national television sit there and say a young aspiring black quarterback should play wide receiver or do the wide receiver drills and the running back drills because what? Because he's a black quarterback, and yet Josh Allen in the same draft, who had better physical skills than Lamar Jackson, didn't have to do these drills. It was never even discussed. And when you can have a guy sitting on your national television saying that, and still a year later be on the national television still, then
defending his comments and standing by his comments.
But even if he's not defending the comments, but even if he wasn't defending the comments now, he's still on your television. He should not be on your television. When somebody makes a comment like that, they should instantaneously be removed from public television. That happens in this country. If somebody was to say something about a soccer player here and say, "No, he's not clever enough to do this or that or the next thing," you would never see him on television or radio again. And until you sort that issue out, now that's just one tiny issue. This is not going to change. There's so many issues, but that's one that's really stood out for us here in Europe, that somebody can actually go on and make such a racist comment. And people just say, Bill, you're just an old guy, and you're just saying this or that, the next thing. No, that was a racist comment, and he should not be on television. And it's not a yes or no question. That's the fact. Get him off.
But Neil, Bill Polian comes from an era in which, remember, he started GMing in like the late 70s, early 80s, where it was rampant for them to look at college quarterbacks who are African American and say, well, there's our next best cornerback, running back, wide receiver, anything but quarterback. We don't care how good he was in college, let alone no matter how many records he set, how much better he was than his white counterparts. We're never going to let that guy come into the league to play quarterback. He's definitely got to play something else because he's got an athletic ability. And a lot of these guys couldn't even run.
Yeah, but my issue is not with Bill Polian, James. My issue is the fact that television companies in America still have him on, when actually they should make a stand and say, no, we're not having that race. Even though
that comes from him, quote, being respected by his peers and building Super Bowl teams at multiple franchises and finding talent in the draft. So he has an eye or a nose for this type of thing. So they let him do what he does, one, because he's old, unfortunately, and two, because, I mean, he's been successful. So that gives him credence to say stupid things every now and then.
But James, sorry, that's not a stupid thing. That is a racist comment. And that's
trust me, I know. I'm being very generous right now because I wouldn't blow my top.
You see, but that's the problem. It's a tiny little inkling into the overall problem. People are allowed to say things like that and then be able to come up with
old.
Well, come up with excuses for it. There's no excuse for it. If you make a racist comment about somebody, you make a racist comment. There's no excuse about being young, old, whatever it is. It's a racist comment, and I just find that.
I'm not defending Bill Foley in any way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, we live in a changing society based on the idiot we have in the office right now, and that's trickled down to people thinking, well, if he said it, I can say it.
Well, in fairness to Donald Trump, I mean, he is orange, and that's quite a minority.
There's no fairness.
That's quite a minority in the country, really.
By the way, as we move to wrap things up here, my son reminded me that the draft in which the Patriots selected Isaiah Wynn, and then they had another draft pick, and he was dying to have Lamar Jackson drafted as a New England Patriot, and they took Sony Michel instead. And I wasn't necessarily on the Lamar Jackson bandwagon at that point, but I definitely was not on the Sony Michel bandwagon. And how different would the Patriots be right now if Lamar Jackson was their quarterback?
Well, I'm just glad you managed to drag this back to the Patriots.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here for.
Look, as I said last year when these 5 quarterbacks came out in the draft, I still think Lamar Jackson is the best of the bunch. Nothing's going to change my mind. And the season he's had this year has proven that. People, even on our own show in our chat group, knocked his passing ability, and I'm like, guys, you wouldn't be all up in arms if, this was Josh Allen. Josh Allen had a worse completion percentage than Lamar Jackson did last year. You want to talk about his accuracy, and he can't make these throws, and he can't make those throws. Allen ran for almost 1,000 yards last year. No one said anything. And he barely threw the football because they were too scared to let him throw the football. The Buffalo Bills did not let their rookie quarterback throw the football. It was run the ball, pitch the ball. Here's a short dump off to the running back. Here's a nice hook to the tight end. But please don't throw the ball to our wide receivers. You're not going to get it there. So.
Well, let's ask Neil. Neil, is Sam Darnold still the best quarterback in the out of that group?
Yeah, definitely. I think by the end of his career, yes. I think Lamar Jackson has been. Lamar would certainly be right now. Of course, he's the best for sure. He's been the most successful, and that counts for a lot. But I would still, if I was drafting them now, I'd probably have Darnold 1, Jackson 2, and then what do you say? Josh Allen 3, Mayfield 4. I still think Mayfield will be okay. Once he gets somebody who can calm him down a bit. But the outlier now looks like Josh Rosen, doesn't he?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which was the guy everyone had questions about.
Character-wise, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think if you got 5 quarterbacks and 4 of them turn out to be good NFL quarterbacks, that's a pretty good ratio. That unusual.
It is unusual. So we shall see. We will continue this conversation in the off season. We are not going to let this go. This is definitely something that we feel extremely strongly about. Again, I don't have the answers, but I'm going to look for them. That's the one thing that I can promise will happen on this podcast. That will be the way I abuse my power. Is that a good abuse of power? I think it is.
As long as it's anything non-Patriots related, you can do what you like, Jay.
Here. I second that.
Next fan up at gmail.com. If you want to be part of the conversation at NFU Podcast on Twitter, it's probably not the best place to have this conversation. Facebook.com/NFU Podcast. A little bit better than Twitter, but again, just send us an email. Next fan up at gmail.com. We will be back again next week Well, actually, there'll be a recap podcast. Then we'll be back again next week with the conference championship games